It is exactly what we have been training for the last 44 episodes. It's that time. Drea, are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Excellent. I am Brian Ward. With me, as always, Dr. Andrea Letamendi, the psychologist. We are all here to talk about Batman, the animated series. We are the Arkham Sessions. Hello, Drea.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing really well. As you can tell, I am pumped. I am pumped about this episode.
I know, I can see.
Because this is taking it back to the very first episode. This is taking it back to episode 1 because we are here in our 45th episode and we are talking about Terror in the Sky. And who do we come across in this particular episode? Dr. Kirk Langstrom.
AKA Man-Bat.
Man-Bat.
So roughly a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, we did our first episode, which featured the very first episode of Batman the Animated Series.
On Leather Wings.
Right. And we, as we always do, we spend the episode analyzing the characters, the motivations, the psychological profile, and sometimes the interventions or treatments that we would apply to those characters.
Yeah.
So we have almost come, it's nearly been a year. We've come full circle, and we're returning to the villain who we started with.
And I will say that it's probably the first time, although we have seen other episodes where we've seen returning characters. Certainly we've seen a lot of the Joker. We've seen a little bit more of Harley. We've seen Two-Face a couple of times. We've seen the Penguin a couple of times. But this is the first time that I would think that we've got a legitimate toss back to that first episode. This episode is directly linked to On Leather Wings. Now, we did that a little bit with Night of the Ninja, Day of the Samurai. That episode seemed like it was sort of a second part to that first parter. But this one, there has been time since Dr. Langstrom was last Man-Bat, and we get to see that he's still suffering a little bit from those experiences. So I'm really excited to talk about a character that we have legitimately, for lack of a better word, seen an arc for his character over the last year.
Right. And just like with real life patients or people that we might be involved with, there is this big, there's a period of time that it's uncertain. We don't know exactly what he's been through. We don't know what's happened. We don't know how many, for lack of a better word, episodes he's had. So there's a lot of gaps there that we're trying to fill in with our knowledge of psychology, with some conjecturing, but certainly he's quite a fascinating character. And in this episode, we learned so much about him and his emotional state and his relationships.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be able to sit down and talk to you about this. Let's start from the beginning. Right off the bat, we see that Man-Bat, or so we think, is off doing the same sort of things Man-Bat was doing in On Leather Wings. If you remember the first time we saw Man-Bat in On Leather Wings, he was robbing a pharmaceuticals company owned by Wayne Enterprises and torturing a security guard, if I remember, tossing him out a window into a convenient moat. This episode isn't so much different. We're on a dock, and we've got two people who are unloading what look like crates of fruit, and this gigantic bat creature once again flies in, terrorizes them, but spends less time robbing them of pharmaceuticals or chemicals, and instead feeds on the fruit. These two people, they bolt, but Man-Bat is standing right there eating, very sloppily, mind you, oranges and looks like other messy types of fruits.
It doesn't sound like this bat, I'm not going to call it Man-Bat because I don't want to give anything away right now, but this bat creature doesn't have the same motivation that Man-Bat did in the first episode. There is this focus on eating this fruit sloppily, and there's this like gratuitous there are these gratuitous moments where we're just sort of watching it sloppily, greedily eat this fruit.
Did it seem a little creepy to you to just kind of sit there as an audience member and just kind of watch this creature just kind of eat? And because there are long periods of time where it's almost like watching a nature show. The bat takes the bite, chews on it a little bit, looks around, might make a squeaky noise, but otherwise just eating.
I think the purpose of that moment was for us to understand that creature was not harmful.
Yeah.
That it wasn't necessarily targeting humans or trying to, injure or murder anyone. That it was just hungry.
Yeah.
Now, certainly, it was putting those humans in harm's way because it was starting to take the crates and throwing them down. And, certainly the men who were at this shipyard or whatever needed to run away to save themselves. So they could have been in danger. But this bad creature clearly has a different motivation than the first man-bat.
Yeah, it just seems to be feeding, because after that, the creature takes off into the sky and basically just goes home. I mean, we get to see a little bit of a sonar POV. The bat creature clearly knows sort of where it lives, where it's from, lands on a balcony, opens the door, and the next thing we know, Dr. Kirk Langstrom is waking up in a cold sweat from what appears to be a nightmare. Is this a nightmare, though? We don't know. But let's talk about this moment. Let's say that this entire preface to the episode was in fact a nightmare. That would suggest that Langstrom isn't over his experiences as Man-Bat. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that possibility.
Well, there's certainly a normal experience. It's very expected that he might have nightmares following his experience as Man-Bat. Mm-hmm. Now, if you recall from that episode, he was transforming into Man-Bat, but could not remember those moments as Man-Bat. So when he returned into his human form, he would find himself disoriented, confused, having these lapses in his memory. And we discussed how that might impact him. Now, it's possible that those experiences had led to some kind of post-traumatic stress, in that he's having these nightmares mm-hmm. about harming other people, about being in this beast or creature form. And certainly if he's had those lapses in memory, that uncertainty and that fear of what did I do during those moments, those feelings of identity crisis, if you will, that I wasn't sure what I was capable of. I may have performed or acted in a way that was violating my own morality, and now I'm dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah, because you don't get the sense that Langstrom, though he did have a bit of a sort of narcissistic view, he certainly believed that as a scientist, he was somewhat above everyone else. He had what some would consider a God complex of sorts. I don't get the sense that had he not been the bat creature, that he would have tossed a security guard out a window of a tall building, right, or would have harmed any of those people the way that he tried to harm them before.
Right, and we agreed that in the form of Man-Bat, he is certainly violent. He's capable of very harmful things, and that, those aspects of himself are kind of circumscribed in his Man-Bat identity. And that's why we were actually leaning toward possibly dissociative identity disorder, which it used to be called multiple personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And that was, along the lines of the idea that he had these two distinct personalities. Now, certainly there was that physical transformation. That's the supernatural piece about this. But the psychology piece is that he had these two very distinct personalities, one much more dangerous and violent and malevolent than the other. The other one, certainly narcissistic, certainly, an overachiever, someone who wanted to essentially create this scientific, successful movement, if you will. And we also talked about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, sure, and how there was that parallel there.
Absolutely.
So he, on the one hand, that, going back to the morality piece, is he responsible for what he did as Man-Bat? Is he, did he have control? And I think we agreed that he didn't necessarily, because he didn't have the memory of being Man-Bat, he wasn't going to be sent to Arkham. He wasn't going to be held responsible for that.
Yeah,
it was
Batman almost sort of under the table gave him the antidote and then handed him off to Francine, his fiance or his wife at the time, and was basically like, he should be cured. Keep him safe,
right.
You know.
As if he had some kind of illness, some kind of physical or psychological illness that needed to be handled, and she was a caretaker, and the understanding was that once he was no longer transforming into Man-Bat, ostensibly he has the antidote, so that won't happen, that he should be fine.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that he was experimenting probably illegally on human beings. I mean, himself, but still probably illegal. This is the sort of thing that you might want to turn a doctor in for if you find out that they're doing experimentations where they're trying to, not necessarily crossbreed, but if you're trying to create a hybrid of a bat and human character, and then that bat creature goes and starts robbing,
sure,
you probably want to put that person
right.
behind bars.
There are clearly legal and ethical violations, and yes, he should have been punished for those things.
So that shows a little bit of Batman's own leniency early on in this series, and we've kind of seen him become a bit more rigid since then. And something that I found to be kind of contrary to that, which shows us a little bit of Batman's own arc in this particular episode. A little later on, we hear Batman walk in after he's heard these dock workers say that there have been reports of giant bat creatures with huge fangs and giant wings and claws.
Reports of a huge bat creature the size of a man. Remind you of anybody?
He's like hanging out with a motorcycle gang now.
Yeah, he does like his motorcycle, but as we see in this episode, he doesn't get to keep it for long.
No.
But he goes and he seems to know exactly who this is, and he knows where to find him, so he goes to the zoo and actually says,
I'm sick and tired of cleaning up after you, Langstrom.
Whoa, now. Let's talk about this a little bit. It's not like he's been continuously cleaning up after Langstrom's problems. And even in this case.
Right, but I'm wondering if between that first incident and now there have been other problems.
Well, we did see Langstrom just a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about Dr. Dorian and Tiger, and Batman actually goes to Langstrom as a consultant. He asks him about Dorian. Langstrom is the one who actually leads him to this guy who is doing these genetic experiments with cats and humans. So Langstrom has been a little bit of a help to Batman, but Batman has no patience for this kind of thing. And I guess I get it. I get that if you go to a dock and find out that a 6-foot bat is wreaking havoc on the dock, and you think that it's Man-Bat, that you could get pretty agitated. But his response seems a little terse. Like it's a little. He doesn't even go to question him. He goes and straight up takes him by the collar, and like he's going to beat him.
Well, who else would it be though? I think the point is that he knows it's him.
Something that I thought was interesting is the reaction that Francine has to all of this. Let's talk about that, because in the first episode, Batman hands Kirk Langstrom off to her. She seems concerned. She is grateful that her husband was returned to her and that he was returned to her safely and that she doesn't have to deal with the nightmare anymore. She didn't know that all of this was going on. It was her father and Langstrom that were creating this serum because her father, Dr. March, believes that man-bats are going to be the next stage of evolution, the one creature to survive the next great cataclysm. And she didn't really have anything to do with it. She was very grateful for his return. Over the last year, you get the sense that maybe things have changed, because when Langstrom woke up from that nightmare, she's just sort of like, have you had nightmares again? Is that how? Go back to bed. Go back to sleep.
She's sort of grown accustomed to his symptomatology, his nightmares, his hypervigilance. Perhaps, again, we're not quite sure how many times this has happened. So it's possible that she's kind of accustomed to this now.
Yeah, but it turns out that when Batman comes to accuse Langstrom comes right out and says, I've not been taking the serum. In fact, I'm trying to find a further cure for it because clearly your antidote, Batman, isn't working. Francine has had enough.
Stop it! Stop it! I'm sick of hearing about that thing. I'm sick of my life. I'm sick of you!
Whoa.
Yeah. Awkward. And Batman was there for all of it.
Well, and Batman also said, I'm sick and tired of you. Everyone's basically sick and tired of Dr. Langstrom.
Yeah, so talk about that, because that actually talks a little bit about what you were mentioning last week with self-esteem and confidence. And clearly over the last year, Langstrom has sort of not been... He's not the same character he was when we met him in On Leather Wings, where he was maybe overconfident and had a little of that narcissistic personality. He is now a completely different guy. In fact, he's terrified that the antidote may not have worked.
Right. And it's possible that over this time he's less confident, he's more anxious, he's uncertain. It could be that he's developed an anxiety disorder, some kind of level of anxiety where he constantly wonders if he is, turning into Man-Bat or having episodes of being Man-Bat. And so it's clear that at this point, a partner doesn't just show up and say, I'm sick and tired of you. That has been built up. She clearly has had some experiences where she has felt she's tolerated, sustained, something within their partnership where she's really at the edge. She's really on the edge. She's really ready to leave. And in fact, she does say that she's going to leave him.
Yeah. And she does. She walks right out the door and leaves Batman with Langstrom. And this is something that was interesting too, was Langstrom is smart enough. This goes back to what you were saying last week and how maybe Batman sees himself and the number of people who tell him that he is inferior or is in some way just as bad as the people he's going after. Langstrom says, your antidote failed. If I'm going out there, it means you weren't good enough. And Batman seems to take that a little personally. Like he sort of agrees. I mean, there's a moment there you can see it's animation, but you can see in his face the shock of realizing I might not be as good as I thought I was a year ago.
Mm-hmm. I failed. And I'm responsible now for all of this, calamity and danger and possibly the loss of people's lives because I didn't fulfill my duty.
So what does he do? He takes the most gargantuan tool out of his belt and uses it to take a DNA sample of Langstrom. And then, quite simply,
I'll be in touch.
I do have to add, though, he does turn around and he says, Dr. Langstrom, if what you're saying is true,
yeah,
he throws a little bit of compassion out there to say, you could be right. It might not be you. I have no better explanation. It's probably you. You're probably Man-Bat. You're probably going out into the streets as Man-Bat. But there is that moment where he turns and has, just this very brief connection and says, you could be right.
And yet Langstrom is sort of done with it. He says, you've done enough already, and Batman just kind of disappears. I mean, it's a great scene because Langstrom, though he's probably the creature, he's in charge of this entire scene. I mean, she gets angry and she leaves, but between Langstrom and Batman, Langstrom doesn't really take Batman's crap. He's not like, he's not crying in his formula. He's basically frustrated that this antidote hasn't worked and that he's potentially going out there and hurting people.
Right.
And this is really upsetting to him. And he actually gets the opportunity to point the finger at Batman and put a little blame on him. It's not necessarily blame that Batman deserves, because after all, in the original episode, Langstrom was injecting himself with a serum. He was becoming a bat. He knew full well what he was doing. He just didn't know what he was doing while he was doing it.
Right. And, in the beginning of the episode, when this bat creature returns to its home and, the next thing we see is Dr. Langstrom waking up from a nightmare, he walks over to the balcony and sees this, remnants of fruit.
Yeah.
And he ends up throwing that rug away. So he does have some doubts in himself. I mean, he's confident that it's not him, but he has evidence that it could be him. But returning to the scene that you're referring to, it reveals the deficits and failures on Batman's end too, because he is, he doesn't say to this person, let's work together, let's solve this together, you have solutions. We really need to uncover this mystery. He's defensive. He's detached. He pushes him away, and he wants to take care of this on his own.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that goes back to Batman being that guy who. It's funny because over the last week, since you talked about Batman maybe not having the greatest self-esteem because of the number of people who tell him he's a bad person, it's stuck with me a little bit, the number of times that you've also said over the course of episodes, including this one, that Batman believes he's the only one who can do it.
Sure.
Now, you've got a doctor here that created this formula, co-created this formula, is probably the greatest geneticist of this, particular, he's dedicated his life to it. And yet, somehow or another, I don't need you, Langstrom, even though you've clearly been working on another antidote. I'm going to go do this on my own.
Right. There is part of that has to do with this recovery, with this process that Batman's experiencing. And I think about, I worked with a lot of soldiers and veterans who've returned from Iraq and Afghanistan with psychological and physical injuries. And a lot of times throughout our treatment, there are long periods of time where on the part of the patient or the client, there is this belief that I don't need you to help me. You may have some answers. You may be the expert. You may have state-of-the-art therapeutic interventions, but I'm going to do this on my own. I am solely responsible for my recovery, and I know what's best. And it's that sense of, I think part of that has to do with I was responsible for getting here. I was responsible for my failures. And so I'm going to be responsible for fixing it. I'm going to be responsible for my own recovery.
And one of those failures may have been leaving Langstrom in the care of his wife rather than taking him to Arkham or Blackgate prison.
He may have regretted that. Sure.
Yeah. And it certainly seems like when he walks into the room, he may have, because he's really quite angry with him.
He's pissed. And we may even say he's more mad at himself than he is at, either scientist.
Now, when he leaves, it's interesting to note that it is clearly in the winter. It is snowing in Gotham. He goes down to his motorcycle. Why he would choose the motorcycle in a snowy Gotham versus maybe the toasty Batmobile, I don't know. Maybe it handles better in the snow.
Well, it had little spikes on the tires, so I'm guessing it has like traction.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, those are some pretty sweet snow tires. But Batman is attacked by Man-Bat. He is attacked by a bat creature just like the Man-Bat that he is accustomed to, and fights Man-Bat a little bit, and actually chases it through Gotham. Once again, we see that Batman doesn't really have the highest of regard for the other drivers on the road, the other people in Gotham City, especially given that they are going through the snow. And if you've ever driven in the snow, you know you got to take it slower, got to pump the brakes a little bit more. You've got to be really careful. Batman is weaving in and out of people, doesn't care. I get that he's got spikes on his tires, but those other people, and you can even see the animators have them swerving a bit. It's kind of interesting to watch Batman interact with the people of Gotham.
They aren't as important as catching Man-Bat or this bat creature.
He has a singular focus on catching this bat creature, and he's everyone else is collateral damage.
And I don't think he sees himself as reckless. He wouldn't characterize himself that way. It may be this very convenient. I would almost say like it's this convenient crisis intervention thing where he's not knowingly putting other people in danger. He's just focused on taking care of the immediate crisis.
Yeah. I did find it a little bit fascinating, though. I don't know. I might put him might be going back into the antisocial personality disorder.
He's not deliberately putting those people in danger.
No, he just doesn't care, which is starting to fit that.
He cares so much that he needs to take down this villain immediately and without pause. The
needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Okay, so he ends up actually getting a hold of the bat creature. He uses his bat grapple to grapple the ankle of the bat creature, and that bat creature begins dragging the motorcycle onto the train tracks, and sadly that sweet motorcycle is destroyed, Back to the Future Part 3 style, with just shrapnel all over the tracks, as this train plows right through it. And that is
the end of a perfect day.
Now, he just leaves all of that wreckage on
what is he going to do?
track.
He's hurt, too. He needs to go back and have Alfred, fix him up.
He is hurt. But if I were worried about people finding out maybe who I was, I don't know that I would leave the bat cycle, even in pieces, all along the train tracks. But, so be it.
Well, we'll see later in this episode. He has the tendency to just walk away.
Yeah, that is true. He does go away, and he goes back to the Batcave where Alfred patches him up. And, it sounds like if you had just had a couple more minutes, or if a couple more things had gone your way, you may have actually caught him. Batman then notices in his bat suit, in the tears of the suit, that there are a couple of hairs there. And then he creepily announces,
I think I got all of him I need.
Ooh.
Yeah. He does his DNA test on Langstrom's DNA that he got. He does the DNA test with the hairs off of the bat creature and finds that they're not a match.
You are not the father.
Nicely done. Nicely done. Or maybe I should be like, I'm sorry, what are you referencing? What is that? I don't know what, sadly.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Sadly, I do know exactly what it is you're talking about, and I don't feel any better about it. So he finds out that Langstrom and the bat creature are not the same person. He's very happy with himself at this point.
Well, this means he succeeded.
Yeah, it did mean that he succeeded. He goes back to Langstrom and actually tells him, hey, I've got good news. You're not the creature. And then uses the particular phrase, we're both off the hook. So it's like, oh, it's not you. I don't have to beat you up. I don't have to take you in.
I did this for me.
Yeah, and it turns out I am a brilliant chemist.
I was right. I'm awesome.
I created a great formula that still works to this day. Go me. So that leaves the problem, though, that there is still a bat creature lurking about Gotham City. Now, at this point, Langstrom has other problems. Francine has left him. She is going to be leaving Gotham. She announces to him. And one of those moments, one of those rare moments of Batman kind of, I don't know if it's sympathy, but he says, let me take care of the bat creature. Don't you worry about it.
You've got other problems.
Wow.
Chicks.
Yeah.
Chicks, man. Like, you've got other problems. I'll let you deal with that.
Human problems that I don't have to worry about.
Yeah, because he can't get close to
I don't
anybody.
get messed up with that.
Yeah, so he lets Langstrom go off to find Francine, which Langstrom goes and does. And while he does that, Batman realizes that there was one other doctor all along who had been working on this formula, and that was Langstrom's father-in-law, Dr. March. Dr. March all along was the person who thought bats were better than humans. And in fact, when he confronts March about this, March stands his ground.
I still believe only a creature like a man-bat can survive the next evolutionary cataclysm.
Trey, what's wrong with this guy?
Nothing.
No. Is he like a doomsday prepper? Does he also have a bunker somewhere underneath where he's creating a bat-like creature army just to survive the next cataclysm?
Well, he certainly has been consistent since the first time we saw him. And our understanding is that he is rather isolated. He doesn't have a lot of relationships. He's basically focused on developing, this amazing serum and advancing this scientific technology, this genetic combination, so that he can basically create this creature.
To what end, though? Is he just trying to get the human race to move forward beyond the next evolutionary crisis? Is that what he's doing? I can't see the end game for him so much.
From the little that we know about him, we could probably assume that he's motivated by that being the person, like he wants to be the person who is responsible for coming up with this discovery. So I think part of it is that narcissism, part of it is wanting to be the only person to achieve this, this amazing discovery. And, what's interesting is that he doesn't quite, we see Langstrom having learned something, having developed, if you will. And Dr. March doesn't seem to have shown that he's learned anything from the previous experience.
Yeah, early on, when Francine is looking for her husband, she goes to her father demanding to know where he is. And that's when we actually learn that he doesn't have much of a relationship with Langstrom anymore.
Where is he, Dad?
I'm not your husband's keeper, Francine. He won't even work with me anymore, remember?
So over the last year, he's not even really worked with the man who helped him create this formula to begin with.
And that's very telling. It could be that Dr. Langstrom distanced himself from Dr. March because of Dr. March's, lack of ethics, his decisions around this very dangerous serum, around this very dangerous research, this experiment that he has going on. And it could be that that Dr. Langstrom wanted to wanted to be separate from that, wanted to break away from that because he didn't agree with the morality of it.
And if you remember in the first episode, it was established that March wasn't actually willing to use the formula on himself. That's why Langstrom was the one testing it out. And in this case, Batman accuses March once again of, did you use this on yourself? And in fact, he's ready to use the antidote. He has it hidden behind his back. And he says, did you use this on yourself? And March just instantly is like, no, of course not. I didn't do that. In fact, he actually was making a recent batch of it and was frightened by Francine when she barged in, and he dropped it and it shattered. And as they were cleaning, Francine may have poked herself with some of these shards of glass, and she ended up getting the formula into her own bloodstream.
Wait, back up. Okay. We just need to clarify this. Dr. March makes one batch of the serum, drops it.
Yeah.
The vial breaks.
Yeah.
The liquid serum goes all over the floor. Now, Francine walks in, sees the mess, and then with her bare hands, but she does not ask what this substance is. With her bare hands, she, a scientist, a trained scientist, bends down and begins collecting glass.
Look, she works at the zoo.
Wait.
She's not in a lab at, the UCLA. She's not in a
any lab.
She's at the Gotham Zoo.
Any functioning lab would have basic, just very, very basic, simple rules about discarding possibly toxic.
I'm sure
substances.
If she had gotten it in her eyes, there would have been a little eye wash center.
Exactly. But what she does is she pricks her finger with the glass, bleeds. We see blood come out, and she proceeds to put that finger in her mouth.
Yeah, I didn't say she was a good scientist.
Well,
what year was this? This animated series, this would have been, this was episode 45, so we're still looking at November of, 92. So it's possible that girls aren't very good scientists. That's what the animators are saying.
You're lucky.
How do you feel about that?
You're lucky that you are not within arm's reach.
That's true. No, but seriously, you're absolutely right. She is not treating this properly, and she ends up poking herself with the glass, bleeding all over the place.
And then sucking her own blood.
Yeah, which isn't what put it into the bloodstream. It was the glass and the formula, just the fact that it drew blood is what put it into her bloodstream. But yeah, she's not very sanitary either. But Batman asks March an interesting question.
Is that what it's going to take? Your daughter's life before you end this insanity?
Is it insanity, Drea? As a psychologist, is this insanity?
This is insanity.
And by the legal term, this would be considered insanity?
By Batman's term, this is insanity.
So he is straight up accusing March of having so singular a mind that not only would he put his son-in-law in jeopardy, he is now accidentally, because he didn't do it on purpose, he has accidentally ended up getting his daughter in on it, and now her life is potentially in jeopardy as well. And where do you think March goes from there? Well, we actually end up seeing that March does a complete 180. This actually stops him. In fact, he burns his work after this incident.
We do get the impression that this is sort of the end of Dr. March's work, that he burns the files, he kind of washes his hands clean of this, so to speak. And there's that somber moment where he realizes he may have it just completely ruined his daughter's life. So he feels very devastated.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about that mentality. We've not seen what happens to March. and we don't know if we will ever see what happens to him. But talk about a person who has now taken his life's work and he has torched it. He has potentially put two very close people in harm's way. What is March going through? Because he's not really a villain. He still thinks he's doing things to help mankind progress, albeit for weird reasons and for very selfish reasons, but he still thinks he's helping mankind. He feels like science is sort of dictating this direction. But he has hurt two people, and he has put a lot of Gotham City in jeopardy, and now he just burned all of that work that has taken him his life.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that feeling that he was wrong could be, completely devastating to him. The idea that he believed that he was doing the right thing. He believed that he was superior to other people and that his mission was what was going to save humanity. And then to realize what he was doing actually was damaging the people around him, and that he would actually possibly go down in history as potentially a harmful person, a misguided person, a delusional person. So certainly there are going to be some he's going to question himself. He's going to be very disillusioned for a time. And I would imagine, I would certainly be on watch for him being depressed, possibly suicidal, possibly, needing treatment for, mainly to help him to find some kind of meaning for the rest of his life, because we get the impression that he has lost meaning. He has lost what has brought meaning to his life.
Do you think that he and Langstrom, just speculating, do you think he and Langstrom end up patching up whatever has separated them in the last year? Or do you think that it actually drives a wedge between now Francine and her father?
I think it really depends on what happens to Francine. Because now we know Francine is the Bat Creature.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Francine.
This time I talk, you listen.
She is on an airplane leaving Gotham, and Dr. Langstrom happens to be on the exact same airplane. Now, he ends up explaining to her that he is not the Bat Creature. And she seems happy by this, but she's also feeling quite nauseated. She doesn't feel very well. She's asked the flight attendant for an aspirin, and in fact, she goes off to the bathroom. Now, Langstrom has no idea that she's actually the Bat Creature.
Yeah, she could just have, vertigo.
Yeah, she doesn't fly very well. Yeah. So she goes to the bathroom where we see not as horrific a transformation as the one we saw in the pilot, but it's still a pretty creepy transformation. It's a great transformation for an animated series.
I agree. I actually think it is pretty creepy because she's in the airplane bathroom and begins to transform. She's clearly in distress. She's possibly in pain. But then there's this moment where she comes out of the bathroom nearly fully transformed, and the flight attendant comes by to see if she's okay. And you have this like horrific moment where, you see her just from the back, and then she turns around and shrieks. And of course that the flight attendant is terrified.
Yeah. Now I do not want to get crass here. We are a family show, but I have to bring up the point that early on, as we see Man-Bat, or what turns out to be She-Bat, we firmly believe that this is Langstrom because it's basically the same creature model. It's the
same physique.
It's very much the same physique, same build, same large chest, and that terrifying head and face. Small legs, but her shirt gets ripped away from her. I'm now that we've established that this is Francine, I am completely surprised that in 1992 we are looking at a bare-chested beast creature.
Are you uncomfortable with it?
We see nipples. I'm just saying, like, I'm surprised that this got through the animators. Did she become masculine in this transformation? Or is this just something that got through what would have been maybe the censors or the network?
I would have loved to talk to the animators about this, because I just wonder if they tried to create a female version of Man-Bat where there's something feminine about that.
Besides the pink
creature,
pants.
besides the fact that the pants are pink or red, right? So like, would they have created, a feminine body, breasts, hair,
Right.
something? Oftentimes it's in the face too, like full lips and eyelashes and stuff.
Well, for a moment, we see the she-bat creature with full blonde hair. I mean,
that's during the transformation.
During the transformation.
But no, ultimately the final, in her final form as She-Bat, her bat form is no different than Man-Bat's. And I like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you think about, I don't know, if you think about bats, would we be able to really tell the difference? Just, seeing them flying around? No, we don't. So I like the idea that, that gender really isn't a defining feature of this villain, or this anti-villain, if you will. She is turning into this beast, and because of the nature of the form, where it's a looming huge creature, her shirt gets ripped off, and her face is completely transformed, and so there's no reason to believe that she's naked. I see it more like she's turned into this beast, and gender doesn't become a part of it anymore.
Yeah.
Equality.
Even when it comes down to visual, we're all the same. We're all uniform.
When all of us turn into Man-Bats and She-Bats, we look the same. We have the same bat form.
That's what Dr. March was going for, I think.
Maybe he was right. Maybe this is what he was talking about. We're all, this is sort of leveling us out. We're all equal. We all have the same abilities and forms.
Furthermore, we all need to wear bright pink pants, which she is wearing, and then they end up getting into a brawl in the airplane, and it's actually pretty terrifying because she sort of opens up the cabin. I mean, people could get sucked out of this airplane, and the pilots are actually talking about air pressure, and losing pressure, and having to do all that. It's a good thing the Batwing is out there to make sure everything is safe.
It's a pretty terrifying scene if you think about kids watching this, that the airplane door is torn off, and all the luggage and items just begin flying out of there, and people are flying out of their seats and hitting the walls, and Dr. Langstrom ends up losing consciousness, and he flies out of the plane. He gets sucked out of the plane, and it's actually She-Bat who grabs him. And
Batman seals the plane back up with the Batwing before flying after She-Bat, and the whole thing ends once again with sort of this brawl that finally Batman is able to get the serum, the antidote injected into her. She then reverts back to Francine. She ends up getting her shirt back, thankfully. She nearly falls off the cliff she nearly falls off the bridge that they are on top of. Who saves her? Not Batman. Dr. Langstrom. Langstrom catches her and says, I'm not going to let you go this time. And it's a very sweet moment. But I like the fact that Batman isn't the hero of that story necessarily. And then Batman does something a little weird. They're on the top of a bridge. They're on, one of those sort of towers, the spires, in between, holding up the bridge. And the Batwing is sitting there. And as Langstrom and his wife are holding one another, Batman walks away toward the Batwing, and then it fades to black. You get the sense that, Batman's just going to get in the Batwing and fly away.
Oh, he totally is.
And these two people are just going to be stranded on top of this bridge.
His work is done. Do you think that he was uncomfortable because they were in a moment of,
well, yes.
They were embracing each other and there were tears.
Yes.
Dr. Langstrom was tearful, and it was as if there was this private moment. Maybe Batman was uncomfortable being present during that really private moment.
I don't think the privacy had anything to do with it so much as I think Batman is really uncomfortable around emotion.
You could be right.
At all.
You could be right.
I think he was totally bolting for the Batwing, and he probably took off. And then all we hear is,
the nightmare's finally over.
And it is. It's over.
Except for the nightmare of being stranded on
the
bridge. That one just started.
Yeah.
That nightmare just started.
Yeah, that nightmare is over. The new nightmare has just begun. Good luck getting home. Maybe Gotham is better off if the two of them just hang out there. But do you think that Francine has the same sort of nightmares to look forward to? Or the thing that I noticed the difference is Langstrom was aware of what he was doing. He wasn't always aware of what he was doing as Man-Bat, but he certainly knew that he was injecting himself, and he experienced the transformation.
Right.
It was always a horrific and what seemed to be a painful experience. Francine, on the other hand, has no memory of these things. So is she going to be a bit more resilient down the line, do you think?
That's a great question. And I have to admit, I'm bothered by that, by the idea that she has no recollection of the transformation into She-Bat. She doesn't discover that, I started at this point and I ended up here. She doesn't realize that she's having these lapses in her memory. That for some reason she's perfectly fine.
Could that be the evolution of the formula itself? I mean, could that be the work that March has done without the help of Langstrom?
But think about it this way. Think about it like you're on a plane and you're not feeling well, so you go to the restroom, and then you wake up and you're outside on a bridge, right? That's not normal.
Well, except we saw in the first scene, she is constantly making her way back home, so she knows where she lives. And presumably, if that first scene is true, if Langstrom wakes up with these nightmares and she is sitting there in bed with her pajamas and her night mask,
right?
Then,
so maybe for her the transformations had been happening at night while she was sleeping, and so then I agree with you. She would have no recollection, no strange experiences, no lapses in memory. And this would be the first time that episode happened to her, one that she would remember. And I think you'd be right that she would probably be more resilient. The other thing, too, is that she has experienced her husband go through this process. So if you use kind of a metaphor of having episodes being perhaps similar to having episodes of mental illness, that certainly if someone has experienced a partner go through it, they understand what, they have more insight into what that's like. Okay. And they're better off in a way. They can anticipate what the episodes are like. They have a partner who's part of their support system who can help them. And there's this, certainly the possibility of healing and recovery a bigger chance of healing and recovery because of those experiences. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And you're right. This is the first time that we've ever seen a couple going through the same experience. Like they can potentially help each other going forward. And I like the idea of that very much, in the same way that we liked the idea of what might happen to Tigress at the end of Tiger. Like I sort of like the idea that we can see this relationship moving forward, getting better, because it was over. I like the idea that the two of them are going to work on their relationship, and they're actually going to be able to help each other through this nightmare that is now over.
Right. And there's something in the psychological field called lived experience. Lived experience is, it just characterizes the fact that some people who are caretakers or therapists or involved in the mental health system also have experienced mental health issues or mental health problems themselves, either in their own family or personally. And so the movement of lived experience is that sometimes the mental health professionals who have personal experience in, whatever it may be, suicide prevention, in treatments for depression, in, medication experience, things like that, that those professionals might be, very helpful in encouraging patients to be engaged in treatment, to be compliant, to to help build their resiliency and their hope throughout the process. And it's really because they too have had personal experience that allows them to have that very unique insight.
So it's why you notice that a number of addicts actually become addiction,
totally.
professionals at clinics, or helping people.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes suicide attempt survivors are uniquely knowledgeable around what that experience is like to be feeling so hopeless, feeling like death is the only answer, and coming out the other side with with a lot of lessons learned, a lot of experiences, a lot of I would call it expertise in that area. And you can't learn that in grad school. You can't learn that from a textbook. It's a really unique level of knowledge, and it's really I'm really very I have a lot of respect for this movement, because I see it becoming more and more valuable. And these I think I'm always about raising awareness and trying to spread knowledge around mental health. And I think this is one of those areas that the field has done really well around, in terms of really valuing and respecting people who have had these experiences within the field.
That's awesome. And I think it's a great way to end this particular episode. Drea, what did you think of this episode?
I thought it was great. I thought, of course, I like the supernatural, the monsters.
Yeah, you're really into the monsters.
And I like that there's this emotional element. There's this relationship that we get to see. And, there's not a lot of Batman psychology here, but, certainly, once again, the sentiment, the connectedness of the two anti-villains, if you will, is almost in contrast to Batman's isolation, detachment, lack of relationships, lack of an emotional spectrum.
And we do get a little bit of Batman. I think it's connected to that episode last week. I think the idea that once again he's being told that he is not good at his job then propels him forward. And you mentioned that, and I think we do get a little bit of Batman psychology, and I like that. So that's it for this week. Next week, join us for Almost Got 'Em. This is actually a favorite of mine because we get to see a number of the rogues. It's a very fun episode where they all get to share stories of how they almost won. But it's a fun one. I enjoy it. And of course, it's written by Paul Dini, so you can't go wrong. That is next week. Until then, Drea, where can people find you?
On Twitter, my handle is Arkham Asylum Doc. I have a website, underthemaskonline.com, where all of our episodes for the Arkham Sessions are posted along with other articles about psychology and comics. And finally, the contact email for us is arkhamsessions@gmail.com.
And you can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028. And of course, we both man the Twitter for Arkham Sessions. That is at Arkham Sessions on Twitter. We definitely want to hear your comments, your questions. Let us know what you think. And I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.